Hey friends, tonight we're going underground, and this is not Minecraft. You're not working in some gleaming industrial shaft, not in a steel cage with safety alarms and helmets and regulations. We're going to a coal mine in Victorian Britain. You'll start your shift long before the sun comes up. You'll carry a flickering lamp down a wooden cage that groans like it's tired of holding your weight. You'll crawl on your stomach through black tunnels too small to kneel in, and you'll learn very quickly that there is no training, no ladder, and no exit plan. We'll hear the beams creak. We'll feel the dust settle in our lungs. We'll work beside children. We'll see what life looked like when a job wasn't about ambition, just endurance. If quiet, uncomfortable history helps you fall asleep, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly brings you peace. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. It's strangely comforting to know who else is falling asleep to the same quiet world. So dim the lights, pull the blanket up to your chin, let your breathing slow, and let's begin. Not in the daylight, not on the surface, but in the dark, where the shift starts before the sun ever rises and ends when your bones give out. You wake up in the dark, not because it's early, but because there's no clock, no electricity, just the cold. You sleep in the same room as your parents, your younger siblings, maybe your grandfather if he's still alive. It's not a house, it's a cottage, barely insulated, one room with damp walls and a sagging roof. You light the stove, if there's fuel, if not, you don't. Breakfast is a heel of bread, maybe cold potatoes from the night before. You drink weak tea if you're lucky, more often just water. Then you walk, across the fields, down muddy roads, through fog or wind or rain. You walk to the colliery, the coal pit. You're not alone. Other men walk beside you. Boys too. No one talks much. They've all done this before. At the pit head the overseer waits. He doesn't smile. He doesn't ask your name. He hands you a lamp. It's small, smoky, and smells like burnt oil. Then you wait your turn to descend. The cage is made of wood and iron. It shakes. It groans. It lowers fast, too fast, into a black shaft lined with damp stone and the scent of rot. Your ears pop. The light above fades. The air gets colder, then warmer, then wet. Finally it stops. The gate opens. You step out. There is no light except for what you brought. There are no instructions, no first day orientation. You follow the man ahead of you, ducking low, then lower, until you're crawling. Your hands scrape stone, your knees sink into mud, your shoulders knock into timbers, the ceiling presses down like it's trying to breathe with you, and you begin to work, with a pick or a wedge, or just your hands, pulling coal from a seam as wide as your body, loading it into a cart, dragging it on hands and knees to the nearest tunnel. You're sweating, you're bleeding from your knuckles, you're breathing hard, but the air is thick. You can't see where the tunnel ends. You don't know how long you've been here. There is no whistle, no shift bell. You work until the overman tells you to stop, or until the gas makes your head spin, or until your lantern flickers out, or until a support beam groans and everyone goes quiet. Because the worst sound in the mine is silence. It means something's shifting, and if it shifts the wrong way, it won't stop until it's too late. This is your first day, and there are no promotions, just more of the same, tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. There's no sky down here, no breeze, no birdsong, no horizon, only stone. You're maybe 300 feet below the surface, maybe more. No one tells you. You stop thinking in terms of feet, and start thinking in terms of lamplight. How far ahead can you see? How long before the flame needs trimming? How long before it flickers? The mine is not a cavern. It's a system of tunnels, dug not with design but with desperation. Wherever the coal is, that's where the tunnel goes. Some are tall enough to crouch in, most aren't. You move by crawling, or stooping, or sliding on your belly. Your shoulders knock against damp timber beams. Your hands sink into sludge, coal dust mixed with moisture and rot. It cakes into your fingernails. You try not to think about what else is in the muck. There's no airflow unless someone cranks a fan in the next chamber. Some pits have ventilation doors, thin wooden planks, opened and closed by young boys who sit in the dark all day just to manage the air. Sometimes they forget. Sometimes they fall asleep. Sometimes there's not enough air no matter what they do. You breathe in coal dust with every movement. You taste it when you swallow. You feel it on your teeth, on your tongue, in your lungs. The dust isn't like regular dirt. It's fine, it sticks. You cough once, then again. It doesn't go away. You learn to ignore it. There are other smells too. Wet wood, Moldavian rat urine, human sweat, sometimes sulphur, sometimes methane, sometimes something you can't name, but when you smell it, you stop swinging the pick and hold your breath. Because that's what gas smells like, and gas means danger. There's no sound, usually, just the drip of water from overhead, the scrape of tools, and the occasional soft collapse of coal somewhere deep in the seam. It's hard to know how far away a noise really is in a tunnel. Sometimes it's right next to you, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's in your head. Your job is to cut coal from the seam. That's it. Over and over. You find a black vein just a few inches thick and work your way along it. Each swing chips away at your strength. Each load makes your arms feel heavier. You move slowly, not because you're lazy, but because speed is dangerous. Move too fast and you kick up more dust. Move too fast and your lamp tips. Move too fast and you miss the sound of something above you, something starting to shift. Sometimes the timbers creak. Sometimes the ceiling groans. Sometimes the wall suddenly gives way with a wet, shuddering sigh. Sometimes a man dies a few feet from you, and you only know because you stop hearing him breathe. You keep working, because what else are you going to do? There's no ladder, no light at the end, no surface until the overman tells you it's time. And even then, you still have to crawl all the way back to the cage, still have to wait your turn, still have to ride back up into the grey, choking light of a day you didn't see begin. By then your back will ache, your skin will itch, your mouth will be dry, but most of all you'll know this is the job, not punishment, not a bad day, just what it is. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. You're not the youngest one here. You might be 16, maybe 13, but you're already stronger than most of the men on the surface. Your shoulders are used to the weight. Your knees are used to crawling. Your lungs have stopped complaining. For now. But today, while you drag a cart through a narrow tunnel, you pass by someone even smaller. A boy, maybe 6, maybe 5. He's not swinging a pick, he's not loading carts, he just sits, alone, in the dark, on a little wooden stool, waiting. He's a trapper. That's his job. To sit beside a wooden door in total blackness and wait for the sound of someone approaching. When he hears footsteps or a creak or a shout, he opens the door, then closes it again. That's it. 10 hours, 12 hours, sometimes more, in the dark, alone. Sometimes he has a candle. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he hums to himself just to break the silence. Sometimes he talks to the rats, because they're the only things that visit. You remember your time as a trapper, your first job in the mine, too small to lift, too weak to dig, but perfect for sitting still. You remember what it felt like to lose track of time, to forget whether your eyes were open or closed, to be afraid of every sound and even more afraid of the silence that followed. No one teaches the trappers anything. No one tells them what the doors are for, just that they must be kept shut, unless someone needs through. They don't know that the doors help control airflow, keep the gas from building up. They only know the rules. Open it too slow and you'll be yelled at. Open it too fast and someone might fall. Sleep and you'll be whipped. Leave and you'll be replaced. The pay is almost nothing, just a few pence a week. Maybe enough for bread, maybe not. Some of the boys cry, quietly, into their arms. Some don't. Some hum the same tune for hours. Others go quiet altogether and never stop. Sometimes older miners try to look out for them, bring them a crust of bread, tell them a joke, ruffle their hair as they pass. But most days everyone's too tired, too hungry, too far gone. The trappers stay behind the doors, like ghosts, barely seen, easily forgotten. But without them the mine would flood with gas. Without them the air would go stale. Without them the carts would jam and the collapses would come faster. You try not to think about it, because there are dozens of boys like him, and they'll be here tomorrow and the next day until they're big enough to crawl with a pick, and then their job will get worse. But for now, he just waits. Small hands folded in his lap, eyes adjusted to a world where light is something that happens to other people. If the boys are trappers, the next step up is hurrier. You don't sit in the dark anymore. Now you pull. You wear a leather harness around your shoulders or waist, connected to a heavy chain, which is fastened to a wagon. A small wooden cart loaded with coal. Sometimes the cart is as tall as your hip. Often it's bigger than you. You pull it through tunnels that aren't tall enough to stand in. You crawl mostly, bent low, scraping your knees and palms on jagged rock, gasping in the thick, dusty air. There's no room to turn around, no space to rest. Sometimes, if the slope is steep or the load is heavy, someone helps push from behind. A smaller child, a friend, a sibling. You work together like oxen, grunting, sweating, slipping, trying to move something that doesn't want to move. The tunnel curves, narrows, flattens. Your shoulders press against the wall. Your foot slips into a puddle that wasn't there an hour ago. You keep going. There's a man at the other end waiting for the coal. He's hot, tired, impatient. If you're too slow, he curses. If you're too loud, he hits the wall with his pick. He doesn't hate you. He just needs the coal, just like everyone else. Sometimes the girls work as hurriers too, often alongside their brothers, sometimes alone. They wear trousers or long skirts tucked into belts. Their hair is tied up. Their faces are smudged black from forehead to chin. Their fingers are cracked and raw. They don't complain. They're not allowed to. No one talks about what happens in the tunnels when the lamps go out, but everyone knows. You pull the cart for hours. You don't know how many. Time disappears in the mine. It doesn't pass, it sinks. There are no clocks, just muscle memory. Pull, rest, turn, pull again. Eat a bit of bread if you remember to bring it. Swallow water that tastes like the tunnel. Sometimes your foot hits something soft and wrong. A rat, a dead bird, a collapsed section. You backtrack. You try another route. The cart never gets lighter, you don't get stronger. But your body stops arguing. After a while, it just obeys. You don't think about school. You don't think about marriage. You don't think about anything except the next curve in the tunnel and how to make the cart follow it without tipping. You become part of the mine, a limb, a wheel, a function. And when the day ends, if it ends, you climb back out, blinking against the pale grey sky, and wonder if your back will ever stop aching. It won't. And soon, they'll move you to a deeper tunnel, with harder coal, with less air, with more weight, and no way to say no. You try not to think about it. You try to focus on the coal, the cart, the tunnel ahead. But it's always there. somewhere behind the next bend, in the creak of the timbers, in the smell of gas that's just a little too strong, in the silence that's a little too quiet. The mine can kill you, not in a dramatic way, not with warning, just all at once. Sometimes it's the roof. You're crawling through a seam that's barely taller than your shoulders. You hear a crack, just a quick sound like a matchstick breaking in your hand. You pause, then it comes down, the coal, the dirt, the timber, a wall of stone and weight collapsing without warning. You don't scream. There's no time. There's just a cough, a thud, then nothing. Sometimes they dig you out, sometimes they don't. There are boys buried under there who never came back up. No grave, just dust and silence and a name scratched into the breakroom wall. Sometimes it's fire damp, methane. You don't see it, you don't smell it. You only know it's there when someone's lamp flickers funny, or when a spark jumps the wrong way. One spark, that's all it takes. The gas explodes. A fireball rushes through the tunnel faster than a man can run. It burns the air itself. It lights your clothes, your skin, the wooden beams above you. The blast sucks the oxygen from your lungs before you even feel the flame. It leaves nothing but charred boots and broken tools. Sometimes it's water. You strike into a soft wall and hear something behind it move. Not rock, water. A trapped pocket built up over decades. It bursts in, fast and cold and full of silt. You try to run, but the tunnel tilts down, and the water knows how to chase. You're waist deep before you blink, then chest deep, then gone. Even if you survive the flood, there's still poison gas. Black damp, just a dead space in the air. No warning, you crawl in and your lamp goes out. Then you feel dizzy, then nothing. Your body keeps moving for a second or two, like it doesn't know it's already too late. Sometimes it's just time. A tunnel that's been dug too far, beams that are cracked but no one replaces, a cart that jumps the rails, a wall that leans the wrong way for just one day too long. No one is surprised when someone dies. They mark it in chalk. They say the name once or twice. Then the tunnel opens again, and the shift resumes. Because the mine never stops. Not for injury, not for funerals, not for fear. You just keep digging and hope today isn't your turn. Sometimes you survive. The roof collapses, the beam cracks, the wagon tips and crushes your leg. The wall gives way and your arm is caught between 2 tons of stone. But you live. They dig you out, drag you through the tunnel, hoist you up in the cage, lay you out on the grass while the overseer curses about the delay. Someone sends for the doctor, or not. Sometimes there's no doctor, just a man with a saw, a bottle of gin and a basin. You wake up hours later in your cot, missing something, a hand, a leg, an eye. The room is spinning, your body shakes, your mouth tastes like blood and coal. And then the real question arrives, what now? Because there's no pension, no workers' comp, no disability, no sick leave. The pit doesn't pay for men who can't swing a pick. The company doesn't owe you anything. The overseer won't even visit, so you make do. If you've lost a hand, maybe you can sort coal by size. If you've lost a leg, maybe you beg. If you've lost your back, maybe you just sit outside the mine and try not to be noticed. Sometimes your family picks up the slack. Your son works longer hours. Your wife takes in laundry. Your daughter starts working before she's old enough. Everyone adjusts, quietly, without complaint. Because complaining doesn't fix anything. If the injury is bad enough, they call you lucky. Lucky to be alive. Lucky to be conscious. Lucky to be breathing in and out, even if every breath hurts. You learn to live slower. You walk with a cane, or not at all. You stop attending church because the walk is too far. You sit on a bench near the pit and listen for the sound of the cage, the creak of iron, the slap of boots, the silence of someone not coming back up. And you think, that could have been me, was almost me, might still be me. Because sometimes the injured return, too poor to quit, too proud to beg. They limp back to the tunnels and pick up a smaller shovel. They dig until their hands shake, until they cough blood again, until someone notices they've gone quiet. Sometimes they stop coming back, and nobody says much, because everyone in the village knows the truth. If the mine doesn't kill you fast, it kills you slow. And sometimes the coal doesn't just kill you, it kills everyone you love. We're jumping forward now, a few generations, past the height of Victorian mining, past the soot-choked cities and child labour reports, into the mid-20th century, to a small mining village in South Wales. Aberfan, October 21st, 1966. A Friday morning. The mine is still running. Coal is still being cut from the hillsides above town. And like every other mine in Britain, it produces more than just coal. It produces waste. Mountains of it. Grey, unstable spoil, byproducts of mining that no one wanted to pay to remove. So they piled it on the hillside, higher, wider. 7 towering spoil heaps, soft, black earth stacked above a village full of houses, shops and children. It had been raining for days. That morning the spoil heap tip 7 gave way. It started with a rumble, a deep, low groan from inside the earth. Then the hillside moved. Not a landslide, not rock, sludge. Thousands of tons of slurry, liquefied by rain, suddenly rushing downhill at 50 miles per hour. It took seconds. It hit the village just after 9:15 a.m, right as the children had settled into their classrooms, right as they were hanging up their coats, right as the day was beginning. The flow-buried Pantglass Junior School, and nearby houses in over 20 feet of black mud. Tearing through walls, lifting floors, collapsing roofs. There was no warning, no time, no escape. 144 people died. 116 of them were children. Diggers arrived. Volunteers clawed through rubble with bare hands. Fathers carried out bodies wrapped in coats and curtains. Mothers waited, silent, standing in doorways with mud up to their knees. Some children were found sitting at their desks, some still holding pencils, some still wearing smiles. The coal hadn't just killed the miners. It had come down the hill into the town and taken the ones who had never even stepped inside the shaft. All of it preventable, all of it warned about. Residents had raised concerns for years, letters, complaints, ignored. After the disaster, there were inquiries, reports, apologies, compensation. But no one went to prison. No one truly paid. The tip had been legal after all, just poorly placed, and poorly managed, and entirely avoidable. Aberfan became a symbol, not of nature's violence, but of ours, of what happens when profit outweighs people, when waste is placed above children, when warning signs are buried until it's too late. The mines didn't just take lives underground. Sometimes they climbed down from the hills and took everything else. We're going back now, back underground, back before Aberfan, back before anyone had ever heard the phrase health and safety, before there were regulations, inspections or respirators, back to when the only thing between you and a lung full of coal dust was your own skin. You're in the mine again, same tunnels, same damp stone, same flickering light, and with every breath you're inhaling the job. It starts small, you cough a little, clear your throat, blame the cold, blame the weather, blame the mould in your cottage, but it gets worse. The air in the mine is full of fine coal dust, almost invisible, not like smoke, not like mist. It's heavier, grittier, it coats your tongue, lines your nostrils, settles behind your eyes. You breathe it in while you work, you breathe it in while you eat, you breathe it in while you sleep because it stays in your clothes, in your bedding, in your hair. and slowly it begins to build. Inside you, your cough deepens, it gets dry, then wet. Then comes the wheeze, the rattling sound at the bottom of each breath. You wake up at night gasping, not because you're dreaming, but because your lungs are shrinking. No one talks about it. Everyone coughs. Everyone knows someone who died gasping for air. It even has a name, pneumoconiosis. The doctors call it that. The men call it black lung. There's no cure, just the slow fade. You lose your wind first, the ability to carry a cart without pausing. Then your stamina. Climbing the ladder feels like scaling a mountain. Then your voice. Thinner, more strained. Eventually you can't walk far, then you can't walk at all. The coal stays in your lungs long after you've left the mine, settles in your tissue, hardens, suffocates from the inside out. And it wasn't just the miners. Wives washed the coal-stained clothes. Children hugged fathers covered in dust. Entire households inhaled it. And for years no one paid attention. Or rather, they paid attention. They just didn't care. Black lung was expected, like bad weather, like old age. It was the price of having work. You didn't die suddenly, not like with fire or flood. You just faded, over months, years, until you stopped coming to the pit, stopped walking, stopped breathing, and still someone would take your place, because the mine never ran out of men, only lungs. Sometimes the mine killed fast, and sometimes it waited for the coughing to start, waited for the breath to thin, waited for the men to leave the pit and sit quietly in a chair they wouldn't rise from again. By the time the doctor saw them, it was too late. They came to the cottages or to the hospitals, if the town had one, or they received the body in silence, washed and wrapped by the family, laid out in the front room next to the stove. No need for an explanation. Everyone already knew. It was black lung. It was always black lung. Some of the bodies were autopsied, some weren't. But when they were, the findings were all the same. The lungs weren't pink, they were grey, black or blue, heavy with dust, cracked like old leather, full of hardened tissue and dead pockets where air should have been. The doctors would press the lungs gently between their fingers, and sometimes fine cold particles would seep out, dust still hiding inside a man who hadn't been down the mine in years. Sometimes the lungs were so fibrous they didn't move when cut. They sagged like dried fruit. The disease had reshaped them, not with infection, but with layers. Years and years of dust settled and forgotten. Some coroners kept records, others didn't bother. The cause of death was rarely written as pneumoconiosis, it might say respiratory failure. Natural causes, or nothing at all. Because writing killed by coal raised questions, and no one in charge wanted those questions asked. The families already knew. They'd heard the cough, watched the colour drain from the cheeks, heard the breathing grow shallow at night. Some wives learned to sleep through it. Others didn't sleep at all. It was always the same pattern. Strong men made brittle. Voices that once sang in the pub reduced to whispers. Hands that once swung picks now trembling from the strain of holding a teacup. Sometimes they died slowly. Other times they simply stopped. One last gasp in a back room. A child sent to fetch the doctor who came too late. And the mine, it didn't notice. It just swallowed another name, another set of lungs, another man who was never supposed to grow old. And then it kept going, because the coal still needed cutting, and there were still boys waiting to take his place. The shift ends, not with a bell or a whistle or any great signal, just a nod from the overman. A quiet grunt, a few words mumbled through coal-black lips. You put down your pick, wipe your forehead with a sleeve already soaked through, stretch your back, just a little, not too far, not too fast. The muscles seize if you move wrong after too many hours bent in the same position. You drag yourself back toward the shaft, crawling, limping, sometimes walking upright for the first time in hours. The tunnels are emptier now, but not quiet, still echoing with breath and boots and the clatter of carts. You reach the cage, wood and iron swaying on cables so thin they feel like thread. You pile in with half a dozen others. There's not enough space to sit, so you lean against each other. Let the walls take your weight. Try not to breathe too deeply. The cage rises. Fast, then faster, your ears pop. The air shifts, and for the first time in a day, you feel the wind on your skin. It's weak, grey, dull. Clouds blot out most of the sky, but it still feels like freedom, or something like it. You start the walk home. Your boots sink into mud. Your shoulders sag. Your legs feel like they belong to someone else. No one talks much. Everyone has the same destination, the same heavy gait, the same layer of coal dust clinging to skin, hair, teeth, thoughts. You pass the rows of cottages, small, sagging, almost identical. You could find yours by smell alone. Peat smoke, boiled potatoes, laundry that never quite dries in the damp air. You step inside. It's one room, maybe two. There's a stove, a table, a bed if you're lucky. There's no bath. Just a metal tub that's pulled out on wash day if there's time, if there's hot water, if someone hasn't already used it first. You strip off your clothes. They fall to the floor with a crunch, stiff with sweat and coal. They won't be washed tonight. They'll be worn again tomorrow. You scrub your hands in a basin. You try not to look too closely at the water afterward. Then you sit. That's it. You sit. And for a moment, everything is still. Your knees throb, your back screams, your fingers twitch. But you're not underground. Not for now. There's food. If you're lucky, boiled cabbage, potatoes, bread so dense it feels like stone. A bit of meat, maybe, if someone got paid on time. Or tea. Thin and bitter. You eat in silence. You chew slowly, not because you're tired, but because moving your jaw hurts. Your family might talk, or they might not. Someone asks about your day, and you just shrug. What is there to say? You're alive. That's enough. You don't stay awake long. The heat from the stove fades quickly. You lay down on a mattress stuffed with straw, or you take the floor. You close your eyes, and the mind follows you there. In your dreams, you're crawling again. You're underground again. The tunnel groans, the air tightens, and just before you fall asleep, you remember. You have to do it again tomorrow. Home isn't rest. It's warmer than the pit. It's quieter, but it isn't rest. Your boots are off. Your body is still, but your mind doesn't stop working. You think about the beam that cracked above you today. You think about the man who didn't show up for his shift and why. You think about the next load, the next seam, the next breath. The cottage is small. One room, maybe two. The walls are thin. The roof leaks when it rains. There's mould in the corners, sometimes black, sometimes green. You scrape it off when it gets bad enough to notice. The floors are cold. The windows are fogged. The blankets are always a little bit damp. Your mattress is straw. You turn it when it gets too flat. There are mice sometimes. You've learned to ignore them. You share the space with everyone. Wife, children, grandparents, no privacy, no silence, no space to think. The baby cries. The stove spits smoke. A pot boils dry. And yet, this is what you come home to. If your hands weren't shaking, you'd fix the table leg. If your legs weren't sore, you'd chop more kindling. But you don't. You just sit, or lie, or fold laundry that will never come clean. Coal dust doesn't wash out, it just fades. You might play a game with the children. You might not. You might say something to your partner. You might not. There's always something that needs doing, and always not quite enough strength left to do it. You don't think about leaving. Where would you go? You were born here. Your father dug coal. His father too. Your sons will go down the pit when they're old enough. Probably before that. No one says it out loud, but everyone knows. This life is inherited. Like debt. Like coughs. You're paid just enough to survive, but never enough to stop. The mine owns your time. The company owns your house. Even your food comes from the company store. On credit, of course. You don't complain, because complaining doesn't heat the stove, and it doesn't change anything. You look at your hands, black-stained palms, cracks around the nails, scars you don't remember getting. You hear the wind outside. You wonder if the cage will freeze tomorrow, if the shaft will flood, if the roof will hold. And you wonder, quietly, just for a second, how many more mornings you can make yourself get up. But you will. Because you have to. Because everyone does. Because the pit is always there. Waiting. The company doesn't just pay you, it owns you. Your cottage, company property, your tools, borrowed from the pit, your food, bought on credit at the company store, the only store, your pay, just enough to cover your debt, and never quite enough to escape it. You don't work for money, you work to survive the system. Everything in the village revolves around the mine. It built the houses, it laid the road, it funded the school, such as it is. It even built the church, with bricks hauled up from underground. The streets are lined with identical cottages, built fast and cheaply. 2 rooms if you're lucky. Cracked chimneys, damp floors, mildew creeping along the edges. Your rent is deducted automatically from your wages. You don't have a choice. The store is worse. It sells flour, bread, soap, candles, coal, even, sold back to the people who dig it. The prices are higher than anywhere else, but there is nowhere else. You buy on credit because your wages never stretch far enough. The more you work, the more you owe. You ask for an advance. They give it to you and dock it back slowly, week by week. The company runs the town council. The company appoints the magistrate. If you complain, the company hears about it. If you organise, the company knows your name before you finish the sentence. If you speak up, you might be fired. And if you're fired, you lose everything. Your job, your house, your credit at the store, your standing in the village, your ability to feed your family, so you keep your head down. You nod when the overman passes. You accept the smaller cut of meat. You ignore the extra hours on your timesheet that somehow went unpaid. Because if you make noise, they'll replace you. There are always more men, always more boys ready to start, always another family willing to take less just to stay above water. And even if you don't complain, even if you're loyal and quiet and work until your bones ache, you are still disposable. The company didn't build this system to reward obedience. It built it to run without interruption. So long as the coal comes up and the workers stay just hungry enough to return tomorrow, everything works exactly as intended. You're not an employee, you're a resource, like the coal. Dug up, used, discarded. And the deeper you go into debt, the tighter the collar feels. But there's no chain to see, just a piece of paper with your name on it. And a house with a rent slip on the door. And a store account that never reaches zero. And every day you wake up in a bed that belongs to someone else, eat food that was never quite paid for, and walk to a job that will kill you if it doesn't forget you first. You think about leaving, sometimes at night, when the coughing keeps you awake, sometimes at dawn, when your boots feel too heavy to lift, sometimes when the roof groans above you, and you realise how little is holding it all in place. You think about walking away, from the mine, from the company, from the dust and the carts and the endless weight of it all. But where would you go? You don't own your home. The company does. Your rent is deducted straight from your wages. If you stop working, the deductions stop, but the rent doesn't. You'll be given notice. A few days, maybe a week. Then the bailiff comes, then the door is locked. Your food comes from the company store. You don't pay in coin, you pay in labour, recorded in ledgers, tracked in quiet ink. Stop showing up, and your account is frozen. The balance you already owe, still yours, but now with no way to pay it back. The doctor works for the company, the school teacher, even the man who cuts your hair once a month on a stool behind the pub. Every familiar face in the village is tied to the same engine, the same coal-fed machine, the same pit. And if you leave, you become a stranger overnight. You could move, in theory. Pack what little you own and walk to the next town, but they've got a mind too, and their own debts, and their own mouths to feed. They're not hiring. Even if you find a job, you'll be the outsider. You won't be trusted. You won't get the good shifts. You won't get credit at the store. And if you have a family, so you'll be dragging them with you into uncertainty, into hunger. Because poverty doesn't follow you, it gets there first. It's waiting at every stop, so you stay. You tell yourself the roof might not fall, the dust might not kill you, the next payday might come with a bonus. The manager might finally fix that flooded tunnel. The cough might go away. It never does. But staying is easier than falling, and leaving doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like drowning above ground. So you wake up, you lace your boots, you walk back to the shaft, and you ride the cage down again. Because it's not about choice. It never was. Not everyone stayed quiet. Even in the worst years, when children sat in the dark for hours, when men died gasping and no one blinked, there were people who spoke up. Some of them were reformers, clergymen, school teachers, travelling doctors. They walked into mining towns and saw things that didn't fit the stories. A 5-year-old with no colour in his cheeks. A widow carrying coal because her husband's shift never ended. A village that coughed in unison every morning and called it normal. They wrote it down, not with fury but with detail. Long reports, letters to Parliament, essays in the local papers. Some were inspectors, sent by the government, eventually. At first, they had no power, no budget, but they had eyes and notebooks, and sometimes just enough influence to force a conversation. They descended into pits and watched, counted children, measured tunnels, logged injuries that had never made it to the surface. What they found was worse than expected, and some of them, quiet, stubborn, refused to look away. And there were others too, workers who dared to speak up, men who risked being blacklisted, who stood in union halls and said things out loud that everyone else had only whispered. They demanded shorter hours, more pay, candles paid for by the company, an extra shovel, a doctor who didn't charge 2 weeks' wages to pull a tooth. Their victories were small, at first, but they planted something. In time, unions formed, not just in whispers but on paper, meetings in basements, votes held by candlelight, strikes that began not with shouting but with silence. Some were crushed, men fired, homes seized, names passed around to make sure they were never hired again, but others made it through. And slowly, painfully slowly, laws began to change. In 1842, children under 10 were banned from working in mines. Then later, limits on hours. Then inspectors with real authority. Then safety codes, ventilation requirements, ladders that had to be replaced, beams that couldn't be too thin. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fast, and it didn't undo what had already been done, but the voices started to spread. Some shouted, most just spoke. This isn't how it has to be, that's all they said. And it was enough. Because once you say it out loud, you can't unhear it. and neither can the people listening. The change was slow, not because it was complicated, but because the people in charge had never gone down the shaft. They had never sat in a dark tunnel as a roof beam groaned. They had never watched their children cough themselves awake. They had never lived in a house they didn't own, eating food they couldn't afford, waiting for a payday that always came just a little too short. And so they moved slowly, cautiously, conveniently, while miners died quickly, while children grew up too fast, while lungs blackened, while bones broke, while families buried their dead before they could even buy a headstone. The first laws looked good on paper. They banned boys under 10, then under 12. They set hour limits, 10 hours, then 9, then 8. But no one sent inspectors to enforce it, or if they did, the inspector was a friend of the mine owner, or warned ahead of time, so the children kept crawling, and the men kept coughing, and the women kept washing blood out of shirts they couldn't replace. And when reformers asked why it was taking so long, they were told to be patient. But the mine was never patient. The mine didn't wait. It collapsed. It exploded. It buried. It consumed. There were victories, yes, the Mines Act, the Factory Act, the Workmen's Compensation Act. But each came only after too many funerals. Each came after the outcry grew too loud to ignore. Each came after someone took a risk that couldn't be undone. Because to fight the system meant being punished by it. To organise meant going hungry. To protest meant eviction. To speak out meant losing your job, and maybe your families too. It was bravery not in grand speeches, but in quiet refusal. In writing your name on a petition. In not going to work that one day. In asking a question in a meeting no one else dared to attend. The change happened. Eventually. The tunnels got safer. The children stayed in school. The shifts got shorter. The wages got better. The coughing didn't stop, but it started later in life. But no one got the years back. No one got to breathe clean air again. No one rebuilt their spine or regrew their fingers, and no one truly answered for it. Not the mine owners, not the shareholders, not the managers who saw the cracks and told the men to keep digging anyway. They moved on. They invested elsewhere. They rebranded. And the miners, they kept going. Because there was still coal, and there was still hunger, and there was always one more tunnel left to crawl through. But then, the mines closed. Not all at once, not with an announcement, but slowly, quietly, like an old man sitting down and not getting back up. In some places it started in the 1950s, others held on through the 70s, a few limped into the 80s, carried by politics and protest and the last gasps of coal-fired promise. But one by one, the pits were shut. The cages stopped running, the carts went still, the black dust settled. There were reasons, economic ones, political ones, cleaner energy, cheaper imports, better alternatives, or so they said. But for the men who still showed up before dawn, for the families who lived in houses built by the company, in villages carved into hillsides, next to shafts older than their great-grandfathers, it didn't feel like progress. It felt like abandonment. No fanfare, no farewell. Just a note pinned to the colliery door, a gate locked, a silence where a siren used to ring. The mine was gone, but its shadow stayed. The village didn't recover. The jobs didn't come back. The children moved to cities. The old men sat on benches outside shuttered pubs, talking about things no one else wanted to hear. The buildings sagged, the stores closed, the weeds crept over the path to the shaft. And yet, the damage didn't leave with the company. The lungs still rattled. The spines still curved. The nights were still filled with coughing from bedrooms where no lamp burned anymore. Hospitals saw generations of coal men arriving in their 50s with the bodies of men in their 90s, breathless, bent, tired in ways rest could never fix. The government offered settlements, occasionally, applications, interviews, long forms, a few pounds for a lifetime of dust. Some refused it, some needed it. None of it felt like justice. The land above the mine didn't heal either. The waste heaps remained. The soil soured, the water darkened, the trees stopped growing, and people remembered. They remembered the days when the mine gave them something, even if it came with a price, and they remembered what it felt like when even that was taken away. Because the mine wasn't just a job. It was the centre of a world. A cruel world. A tired world. But a world all the same. When the last cart came up, everything else went down with it. It's quiet now. The shafts are sealed. The pits are flooded. The rails rust in the tall grass where wagons once rolled every hour. The cages don't creak. The air doesn't hum. And for the first time in living memory, there's no coal dust drifting down the lane. But the mine didn't disappear, it just changed shape. It's in the houses, still standing, still damp, still patched with the same old boards. It's in the lungs of the men who made it past 60 and still cough when it rains. It's in the hills, scarred and sunken where waste tips once towered. It's in the bones of the widows who buried husbands before they turned 30. It's in the names on old plaques in forgotten union halls. It's in the songs and the silences. The mine built towns. It built railways. It powered factories, fed furnaces, lit cities. Coal built the world we know. And it broke the people who dug it. They were told they were lucky to have the work, told to be proud, told to be strong, and they were, but strength doesn't protect against black lung, and pride doesn't rebuild a spine crushed under stone, and luck doesn't stop the mountain from falling on your children. What it gave, it also took. But still, the memory stays. In some towns there's a statue, a steel figure with a pick on its shoulder, head bowed, cap low. In others, just an empty field where the pithead once stood, grass growing over a hole too deep to forget. The children don't go into the mines anymore, but they still carry the story, the weight, the cough, the silence at the dinner table when someone mentions the old days. Because those days didn't end. They just faded into the walls, into the roads, into the faces of the people left behind. And even now, decades later, you can still feel it. When the wind comes down from the hills and smells just faintly of smoke. When you pass a cottage that's too small, too sloped, too familiar. When you see a man in his 70s breathing like he's underwater and you know why without asking. The mine is gone, but it's still here. That's the story. Not of one mine or one man or one disaster, but of millions, spanning decades, crawling through generations, layered in soot and silence. You wouldn't last a day in a Victorian coal mine. Most people didn't. Not whole anyway. They gave their bodies, their lungs, their childhoods, their fathers, their sleep, their breath, and in return, they got survival. Sometimes, they got to live one more day, to go back into the dark again, because there was no choice, no glory, no legacy, just the slow work of turning stone into heat and men into ghosts. If this kind of quiet, heavy history helped you rest tonight, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it truly helps. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. It's strangely comforting to know who else is out there, drifting off to the same quiet stories. So now let your shoulders sink, let your jaw unclench, breathe slowly, deeply, like you haven't spent the day in dust. The shifts are over, the lamp is out, the mine is silent, and you can rest now. Sleep well.